So yesterday was a big day for Sony and the PlayStation 5 for potentially all the wrong reasons. A price hike was announced in pretty much every region beyond the United States, which, of course, if you know anything about economics, it's going to trickle down to United States system sales, because how do people buy these systems anyways? You don't go into a store, you buy them online. I thought it was pretty self-explanatory how this would impact the US market and really the bigger scope of how it'll impact the video game market. But I had a lot of people, a surprising amount of people, who were saying that I was a clickbaiter for saying that Sony is raising the price of the PlayStation 5 and not specifying that it did not happen in the United States, which, I mean, that just means you're the xenophobic person. You're the one afraid of Xena the Warrior Princess, Lucy Lawless, who comic book guy on The Simpsons was absolutely in love with, because RGT is a global brand, okay? I have viewers from all over the world, and I understand how this is going to impact them. And although the price hike did not happen in the United States, it's going to happen in a roundabout way, because I understand economics, I understand how business works. So, you know, take those terrible viewpoints and shove them up your ass, I guess. Like, you're not getting paid by Sony, okay? I know for damn sure you're not getting paid by Sony. And to justify a company who has reported record profits in the last year to raise the price of their system because of inflation, a luxury item, something that nobody actually really needs, to justify this and say it's not a big deal, well, that's just silly. I thought I taught you better. I hope you learn your lesson from this. But of course, beyond just the PlayStation 5 price hike happening in every region in the world beyond the US, we have the sort of fallout from this aspect. What are the other companies going to do now that Sony is going forward with this and doing this? And yes, it will impact the US market. So even if you're just a die-hard red, white, and blue fan, it's going to impact you too, because you buy these systems online. Like, Jesus, I don't need to explain this. I'm not going to explain this, and I don't need to explain this because you're educated. You're a smart person because you watch RGT. However, we do have to talk about what these other companies are going to do when it comes to console manufacturing, such as Microsoft and Nintendo, and beyond that, just how it's going to impact the different marketplaces, because this is something that could potentially be a pretty big turning point for both of these companies in specific regions. Now, Japanese PlayStation fans were absolutely furious at this announcement yesterday. They thought it was one of the most egregious things, absolutely disgusting, and I totally understand that sentiment. When you look at how Sony has just pretty much reciprocated any sort of feelings for the Japanese market, they are kind of a negative thing. Of course, they shut down their Japan studio. Yes, there is a subsidiary who did the Astro's Playroom stuff that is currently working on games, but it's clear that Sony has pretty much abandoned the Japanese market in favor of the US market. And you know what you're saying, RGT, you say that you want Nintendo to focus a little bit more on the Western market, and yeah, I do, but I don't want them to completely abandon the Japanese marketplace, because it's a prominent thing for them, it's an important thing for them, and I understand that. Just show a little more love to the West, get a good balance going, 50-50 sort of thing. You know I'm all about the 50-50. Well, with this announcement, Microsoft was actually contacted by Kotaku for a statement to see if Xbox was going to be raising the price in any region for the Xbox Series S or the Xbox Series X. And I know, screw Kotaku, but at least they reached out and did get a statement from Microsoft saying the following: "We are constantly evaluating our business to offer our fans great gaming options. Our Xbox Series S retail suggestion price remains at $299, and the Xbox Series X is at $499. This also applies to other markets and their current pricing." So pretty much Xbox said, well, we're not going to do anything with that. You know, this is not what we intend to do. And when you look at Xbox, you could say, okay, well, isn't Xbox mostly a software company nowadays? Do they really care about the hardware side of things? You can play your Xbox games on multiple devices beyond just the home console, and I completely agree with that. It's more about the choice, because I feel like there's a large contingency of console gamers who are just not interested in PC stuff. I will play PC stuff if a company reaches out to me and is like, hey, we have an Epic Games code for you, or we have a Steam code for you, we want you to check out this game. Okay, that's fine. But I'm not going to go out of my way to play a PC version of a game over a console version of the game. I prefer consoles. I prefer the ease of use when it comes to a console. It's just what I like, and there are many other people like me out there. So what's interesting about this for Xbox is now they're positioning themselves as a more budget-friendly system in pretty much every market beyond the US, and you could even extend that to the US because the Xbox Series S at $300 is still an incredible value. But I think this is very interesting for Xbox, and we'll sort of talk about why in just a minute once I talk about Nintendo. Now, Nintendo hasn't gone on record as saying that they're gonna potentially do price increase stuff. Nekai, I think I'm saying it right finally, or Nike as we like to call it here, which is of course a publication over in the East, did interview President Furukawa recently about the prices and inflation and stuff like that, and he said that there essentially wasn't any plans to do anything with the price of the system. They've sold over 100 million units combined on all of the different Nintendo Switch models, so it's not something they're going to do, and I don't think they are going to do something like this. A lot of the key components of the Nintendo Switch, while they have gone up in price to develop them from the manufacturing side of things, chip shortages and whatnot, it still hasn't gotten to a point where it's like, oh, we're losing money, we're bleeding money all over here, we need to raise the price of the system. I understand capitalism. I like capitalism. You know, go out there and make your money. And, you know, if there's a supply and a demand issue, you balance it. If there's a large supply and there's a little demand, you lower the cost. If there's a high demand and there's a low supply, you obviously raise the cost. I get that. The problem with this all comes in the fact that there's something called greed. And when it comes to greed and companies being greedy, that's where the problems start to lie. Because when a company like Sony comes along and literally says that they're having record-breaking profits, and then they say, oh, well, we got to charge you more because reasons, inflation. This is a luxury item. This is not something that this isn't food. This isn't a roof over your head. This isn't paying your light bill or something like that. This is a luxury item. You're really showing your true colors when you do something like this. I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. Except we don't love you with this, Sony. We think it's ridiculous, but let's take a look at a bigger picture here, because there's something that's sort of flying under the radar with this, because I think everyone is still in that initial shock phase with PlayStation and Sony being like, hey, we need to charge more for our system. We need to charge more for it. We're not making enough money. The thing of it is that I find very fascinating with this whole situation is when you look at the Nintendo Switch and when you look at the Xbox Series S and Series X, in all of these regions beyond just the United States, which you can technically buy a Switch for cheaper than a PlayStation 5. You can technically buy a Xbox Series S for a lot less than a PlayStation 5. How is this going to impact system sales in those regions? Is this going to potentially be a turning point where a company like Microsoft can start to get a foothold in the Japanese market? Let's be real. Nintendo obviously dominates Japan. It's just sort of how it is. But there is that sort of second place that, you know, both Sony and Microsoft would probably like to have in those markets. With this price increase, you have to imagine that people are going to look at the Xbox systems versus the PlayStation systems and be like, well, you know, this is cheaper. And obviously, first-party titles sell consoles, you know. Let's not get into that whole conversation about software and console exclusives, because all of a sudden console exclusives are bad and stuff like that. But there comes a point in time where you have to be like, you have to be real with yourself, and you have to be like, well, if I can't afford this, but I want, you know, this luxury item and this is cheaper, maybe this is a better alternative for me. Maybe I'm not interested in these first-party heavily narrative-driven Sony titles. I just want to play some video games. And the Xbox is a great ecosystem of games. Like I'm playing Shenmue right now, once again, because I'm an idiot, on my Xbox Series X, and I can also play Daytona USA on there too, that I bought for the Xbox 360 back in the day, and I can play new games and old games, and there's a whole big variety of stuff. Same thing with the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch has already positioned itself as a lower price point. At the most, you know, it's a little bit more for an OLED system than it is for an Xbox Series S, but obviously this is a different style of system. You can play it with you on the go, you can play it with you when you're at home. I feel like a lot of markets in pretty much every region beyond the United States, and even software developers, have to start looking at this price increase, have to start looking at both all of these companies and being like, well, what do we want to put our games on? If people aren't buying this system in these particular regions because of the price increase and they're buying other systems, I'm going to want to put my games on the system that has a big install base. I'm gonna want to put my games on the system that continues to sell well, because I have a better chance of recouping and making money than I would developing for a PlayStation 5. And like I said, I understand that a lot of my viewers are in the United States. I'm in the United States. I get it. But you have to look at the bigger picture. And like I said, you buy your PlayStation 5s online, okay? This is going to impact the whole market. You're not just walking into your freaking Walmart and being like, let me get a piece of cheese, let me get some pickles, and let me get this PlayStation 5. Like, no, that's not how it works anymore. Because of the online infrastructures of these systems that we have now put in place, this is how you buy stuff, especially with newer stuff that's already hard to get in the first place. I really hope that all these apologists and all these people just saying, oh, it's not a big deal, Sony's raising their price, you get those pickles from Walmart and you try to stick one in your mouth. You ever try to put a pickle in your mouth? Okay, I can't. I start coughing like one of those big kosher pickles or whatever. I start coughing like upon entry, like I gotta bite the end of it, because you obviously are very good at fitting this whole pickle like down your throat, and I salute you. You are a throat goat. But I'm not a throat goat for Sony. I'm not a throat goat for Microsoft. I'm not a throat goat for Nintendo. I'm a realist. And in the real world, I could see how this could potentially impact both Microsoft and Nintendo in positive ways and Sony in negative ways. When these core marketplaces are the ones talking about this and being outraged by this, and the core fan base of Sony is also outraged by this and talking about this in a negative light, there's no reason to try to be like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal. This isn't that big. Maybe you already have a PlayStation 5. Okay, I can understand why you wouldn't care, but then why would you watch the video? You see, none of this makes sense to me. None of this makes sense, but I think this is going to be very interesting. I think this potentially opens the door for Microsoft to actually make a bit of a splash in Japan. I honestly think that in other regions, Europe, Mexico, Canada, like these are your brothers, man. These are your brothers, the people that live above you, the people that live below you. When you live in the 3-story house and you live in the middle. I grew up in a middle house for a couple years, and there was my great aunt who lived below me and my godmother who lived above me. Like, I understand this. You got to look out for people. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. But what do you think about this? Do you think this is going to impact Sony in a negative way? Because obviously it is. But what is the positive effects going to be coming from this? How are these other companies going to potentially put a foothold and make a stronghold in these marketplaces now that Sony is kind of alienating themselves and obviously pissing off a lot of people in these regions? And how do you think this is going to impact the US? Because it is, you fools! You fools! And as always, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Hit that bell notification as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. I'm actually sweating. I got really angry there for a minute. Later.